So our first slide says Texas in the search of opportunities. Texas today has a second largest economy in the United States. Very strong economy or very large economy here in Texas. In addition, Texas's diverse industrial base has drawn many businesses and workers in recent decades because of light regulation, low taxes, and a low cost of labor. So lots of businesses want to come to Texas. Traditionally, agriculture has been among the state's largest industry. So agriculture just means like farming. They're growing vegetables and crops and things like that. That's agriculture. So that's one of the largest industries here in Texas. And it produces the most livestock and livestock product in the country. Livestock are like what you would have on ranches. That would be like sheeps and cows and things like sheep, cows, and that. That's in our classwork. The topic is social studies and it says Texas settlement. Livestock products in the country. The state is also a leader in export revenue. So a lot of the things that the state sends out, it sends out to everywhere, to different places for people to. If you only have one, Chase, so long as it's the questions, you're fine, because we're reading this together. There's no questions on here. We don't have to answer anything on here. We don't have to move anything around or do anything. We're just reading this one. The second one is the one that you need to have. State, no, sorry, I read that. Other industries driving growth include business, education, and health, hospitality, and manufacturing. So there's a lot of different businesses and companies that are opening up and coming to Texas. Again, Chase, if you don't have two, that's okay. Just make sure you have the one that says settlement patterns questions. It kind of looks like it has a map of Texas, but it's got a bunch of different colors. Four different colors. So long as you have that, that's the one you need.
Mister, I don't know what we're doing because my computer lost connection.
Right now we're working on social studies, so you're going to go to classwork. On the left side, you're going to click on social studies. You're going to find where it says Texas settlements.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. There's a lot of different businesses coming to Texas that want to have their companies and their stores here. Okay, we're going to talk real quick about natural resources. And I want you to take a look at this map here. So here's a map of Texas, but you'll notice that instead of like cities or anything like that, what it has is it has little pictures all over it. If I look here, we call this the key. If I look at the key, it tells me what the little pictures mean. So there's one here that's a picture of an orange. It says citrus. So they're saying that here, where I find the orange on the map, that they grow lots of citrus there. So like oranges and limes and lemons and things like that. Got a picture here of corn, and that's where they grow lots of corn. So anywhere on the map, if I find those pictures of corn, that's where they grow that in Texas. I have little pictures of cotton. That's where they grow cotton in Texas, those areas. They have a symbol for rice, for wheat, for cattle, for fish, sheep, for natural gas, petroleum, all of that. Yes, Bailey.
I went to a place called Dallas, Texas, and it had a lot of cotton there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
different parts of Texas, they have huge farms that grow different things, or they have ranches where they take care of different animals and things like that. Now here, there's not a whole lot, mostly because of where we live. We don't get a lot of rain here. It's very dry here, so things don't tend to grow as well. But you're right, Bailey. Over here in this side of Texas, where they get some more rain, they can have like lots of cotton. You can see up here near the top north of Texas have wheat and they have corn that they grow, and then all around here they have cattle. They have lots of big open spaces. Let me see, Chase. I'm looking at yours right now, Chase. It has it attached there. The settlement patterns questions. It says your name first, so it'll say Chase, and then we'll have your the title after that. But it's there. I can see it on my screen. For natural resources, it says Texas's most important natural resources are its large mineral deposits, particularly of petroleum and natural gas. So these two things here, these are very important for Texas's economy. This is how a lot of people make money in Texas. Petroleum and natural gas. If you've ever seen the big oil derricks, they look kind of like really big, tall capital letter A's sticking out of the ground. And what they're doing is they're pulling up oil out of the ground so that we can use it to make things like gasoline, so we can use plastic, all sorts of other things. It's estimated that oil reserves in Texas form about 1/3 of the country's total supply. So with the oil just in Texas, it's about 1/3 of what we have in the country. Okay, for right now, Chase, I'll help you find it later. For right now, just focus on what we're doing now, because you need to hear this. You need to know what we're talking about, so that way when we get to the questions, you can answer them. In addition, the state has fertile soils and rich grasslands that support large herds of beef and dairy cattle, crops, and sheep. So not only does Texas have oil, but the soil here in parts of Texas is very good soil. You saw last week in one of the passages, they said that it was called rich soil, very good for plants to grow in. Because of that, they can grow crops, or they can use that soil and grow things like corn or grass for animals to eat. They can have animals there. They'll have plenty to eat. This slide says landforms. So now we can see that we don't have the pictures we did back here. But what we do have is we can see this picture, or this map of Texas has different colors. Down here, if I look at the key, the colors tell me what kind of landforms I'm going to see. I can see that like this beige color here means that the land is very low. Here, if it's kind of this dark green, it means that there's hills. And if it's a bright green, it has mountains.
Mister, aren't you going to answer some questions?
After we finish reading all of this.
Okay.
So here, I can see on this side of Texas, it's mostly low land. There's maybe some hills starting toward the middle. Then over on the west side of Texas, where we live, we start to see that the land gets higher and that we have the mountains right here. It says the four major landforms in Texas are hills, mountains, plains, and plateaus. If you remember from last week, plains are big flat areas of land, very similar to plateaus. The big difference is plains are usually covered with grass or something similar to that. There's not lots of trees there in plains, but it's very flat land, very good for things like cattle, like cows and sheep that need a lot of space to walk around and need lots of grass and things like that to eat. Yes, Nakai.
Can I use the restroom?
Go ahead. Okay. And now we're going to go over our four regions of Texas again very quickly. We have the coastal plains here. Is this orange part of Texas? The coastal plains is the largest natural region in Texas. Coastal plains vary from being completely flat to having rolling hills. So remember, a rolling hill is when you have one hill and then right after you have another hill. So just like one hill after another, they call rolling. Home to more Texans than any other natural region. So most people in Texas tend to live around this part of Texas. Doesn't mean that no one lives in the other parts of Texas. It just means if they count all the people that live here, more that live here than live in other parts. A plentiful water supply. So they're right next to the ocean. They have plenty of rivers here in this region of Texas. So plenty of water there. Coupled with its flat land, make the coastal plains ideal for farming and ranching. So this is the largest region of Texas. It's right next to the Gulf of Mexico, which would be right here. The climate, it's mild but humid. So it doesn't always get as hot. The temperatures don't get as high as they do here in El Paso, but it feels different over there. If when they say that something is humid, it's kind of like when you finish taking a shower, how the restroom feels after you get out of the shower, that you can feel the water in the air, or if you've ever walked into the restroom after someone has finished taking a shower, you know that the air feels different. It feels wet. And that's what humid is. Humid means there's a lot of water in the air, that you can feel it there. Here, our climate is very dry. So when we go outside and it's hot, you don't feel the water in the air. You don't feel it very often. The only time you can really feel it here is right after it rains. It'll feel a little humid. But over there, it's humid a lot more often, but mostly because they're here next to the ocean. So the landforms you'll see here, you'll see some plains, some rolling hills, rivers, and they have what they call the Edwards Aquifer, which is like an underground pocket of water. The resources, the things you can find in this area that people use, would be things like lumber or trees, wood for building things. Farming, you'd have lots of farms here. Trade, people trading one thing for another. That's usually what happens here because they're right next to the ocean. So they can have big, huge ships filled with all sorts of different things sail into these areas here and then sail back out. Tourism, people like to go there probably to go see the beaches and things like that. They have ranching, so lots of ranches. Oil and petrochemical industries, so people that dig up the oil and stuff work here in this region of Texas. The Great Plains is this blue region right here. The Great Plains have very flat land. It's usually dry. It's covered in broad grassland and with very few trees. The land is also not completely covered with, but has some farming areas. So this might not have as many as the coastal plains, but it has some areas where people can farm. Because it's very dry and has little water supply, early settlers faced droughts and sandstorms. So here they didn't have as much water as they have in the coastal plains. So when people first moved over here, it was kind of hard for them at first because it was very easy to run out of water if it wasn't raining. Now the region is known for supporting extensive cattle ranching and dry farming. So cattle ranching is good here because of the fact that they have those grasslands where it's just flat. There's not a lot of trees or anything else. So the cows have plenty of room where they can just walk around. They can eat up some grass and they can walk around and be comfortable. And dry farming. So anything that doesn't require a lot of water. So we saw on this map up here that things like corn and wheat, some cotton will grow up here. Because it doesn't require as much water as some other things that might be growing down here, like the rice, that requires a lot more water. So the Great Plains is the second largest region of Texas. It's the northwest part of Texas. The climate is dry here, and there's not a lot of rainfall, but there is some. The summers aren't super hot, but the winters do get pretty cold. They have plains here, they have hills, they have rivers, and they have an aquifer, which again is another underground pocket of water. Some of the resources, the things people can use here, are oil and gas. So the oil and gas industries also have jobs and businesses out here, and people farm and ranch out here since they have all that flat open space. The Central Plains, the green part here. The Central Plains are covered in vast grasslands full of thick grasses and rich soil. Again, rich soil just means it's very good for growing plants. That makes this region perfect for farming and grazing. Grazing is just when the cows and sheep and things like that walk around and they'll eat a little bit of grass and then they'll move and they'll eat a little bit of grass, they'll move, they'll eat a little bit of grass. The Central Plains region is a rural area, not having a high population. So, not a whole lot of people will live in this region of Texas. Everyone's kind of spread out from each other. There are mainly cattle ranchers here. That's probably why things are so spread out. Because if you've ever seen a ranch where they have lots of different animals, they need a lot of space for the animals. The bigger the animal, the more space you need. So cows, I don't know if you've ever seen a cow in real life, but they're not, little teeny tiny animals. They are big animals. Cows need lots of room to walk around in, to eat grass, and all of that. Another large industry is oil and natural gas. So again, we see oil and natural gas companies have jobs and have businesses out here.
Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
For like our thing that we're gonna answer, if we need to go back, can we go back to this?
Absolutely.
I still have
Okay.
about 8.
There aren't a ton of large cities, so not very many big cities in this region of Texas. There's a lot of land for farming, for ranching, for oil and natural gas. This is the third largest region of Texas. This is in north central Texas. It gets cold in the winter, it gets hot in the summer here, and there's not on these slides. The other part is where we have the questions. So it gets some rain, not as much as the coastal plains, but still it gets rain. There's plains, so that flat land, and there's also some rivers here in this area of Texas. And the big businesses here are ranching and agriculture. So growing crops and taking care of cattle. And then we have the mountains and basins region, which is our region of Texas. This is where we live. Don't worry about the homework, Ezekiel. I'll let you know later. For right now, our focus is this. The mountains and basins region are the driest and the windiest region in Texas. This land is mostly covered in desert. It's in West Texas. The vegetation, so the grass or the plants that grow here, are things like mesquite trees, mesquite grass, cacti, and desert brush. So things that don't require a whole lot of water, because again, this is the driest part of Texas. So things that need lots of water to grow and to be healthy don't grow very well over here because we don't have as much water as they might need. Agriculture is another main industry. Farming employs people that grow cotton, fruits, vegetables, and cantaloupe. So again, things that can grow here that don't require a ton of water and like it to be hot when they grow very well over here. If you've ever driven, if you've ever gone with mom or dad anywhere, and if you've gone and you've driven into like New Mexico and you're going on I-10, you pass by a couple of farms on the way, and if you look to the side when you're driving that way, you can see things like cows and some farms and things like that. So you know that people do have farms out here in this region of Texas. They have ranches as well. So another large part of the economy is again oil and natural gas. So this is the smallest region of Texas. It's in the far west side of Texas. The days are very hot and the nights can get pretty cold. Same thing with the summers and the winters. The summers can get pretty hot and the winters can get pretty cold. It doesn't rain as much here, even though it does get kind of cold, because there's not as much water in the air. It doesn't rain as often here. You'll find basins, you'll find some rivers, you'll find mountains, canyons, plateaus, and mesas. In this region of Texas, there's lots of farming, there's lots of oil and natural gas jobs, and factories. The major city here is El Paso, where we live. So, like we had asked earlier, if you need to go back to this, you absolutely can. It's not gonna disappear from you. But on Texas settlements, this is the one you're looking for. It's like a picture of Texas, but again, it has the 4 different colors. If I open that up, I have a few questions. So it's only 2 pages, 5 questions in total. So what you're going to do,
Can you find that?
I'll show you right now, Aileen.
Okay.
To answer the questions, you're going to have to add in, or sorry, you're just going to have to click here on the lines. And you're going to find the text boxes where you can type in your answer, okay? You can see here, they don't have a line around them, but if you click on the lines, that's where you'll find the text boxes. So question number 1, and I'll read the questions first, and then those of you who need help finding it, I'll help you out. Question number 1, what region would people move to if they wanted to fish for a living? Why? Question number 2, what regions would people move to if they wanted to make a living off of farming or ranching?
Mister, where can I find that?
Again, baby, let me read the questions and then I'll help you find it.
Okay.
Question number 3, what region of Texas do you think could be harder for people to settle? Why? When it says to settle, it means what region of Texas do you think it would be harder for people to live in? To go and move there and have their house and live. Question number 4, what do you notice with the bodies of water and major cities in Texas? So this page gives us a separate map. And all these blue lines here are rivers. And it says, what do you notice about the bodies of water? So like our rivers here and where we see the cities, Texas. And the last question, question 5, why do most people settle near bodies of water? How was that natural resource helpful when cities were first being developed? Why do cities want water? How does that help people? For that question there. So you can go ahead and, if you already found it, you can start answering your questions. Not, like I said, I'll help you find it right.